Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It is time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It's April.
I cannot believe it.
Well, listen, don't get excited because it's going to be a rough month.
Great.
Yeah, no. In fact, we drag eclipse season over the calendar, in with us. Mercury turns around and goes retrograde today. We've got an eclipse at the end of the day on Sunday. So we are in it. I guess maybe a little bit easier at the end of the month. But there's some assistance with this, so let me make a couple of announcements. Finding Your Voice, my new class started this past weekend. I always let people in for a couple of days into the class. So if that interests you and you didn't sign up, you can sign up for the next day or two and catch up and join us with next Saturday's live class. Yesterday was my Mercury retrograde webinar, so that exists. If you are on my mailing list, you already have the recording. So if you don't have the recording in your email inbox, you're probably not on my email list. So stop what you're doing when you finish listening to this podcast. Go to michaellennox.com, scroll all the way down for the little newsletter sign up thing, and get on my newsletter, and every couple of days I'll be sending out the recording to people who sign up fresh. But you should have that recording in your inbox if you are on the list. And it talks all about not only how to move through the retrograde and the eclipse season for April, but it also gives a little bit of individual feedback for the different sign placements and moon placements and rising sign placements. And it's the first week of the month, so this Thursday is Global Healing Meditation.
So many things.
Yes, no, it's a crazy week. I'm a little insane with it all, but there's just lots of help and support, kids. It is going to be a rough month, especially the first couple of weeks of it. And so please reach out in the different ways that I support you and, have at it. Ooh, we have a juicy question, and it's one of my favorite sort of topics about sort of classical astrology principles that have no business in a modern world. So
Okay.
let's hear what Francine had to say. So Francine writes to us, "Dear Michael, I love your podcast. I just found you a few months ago, and I've already learned so much. I saw a post on my socials about this eclipse season, and the astrologer went on and on about the malefics, that there were these bad energies that are part of this eclipse season. This person was so fear-based. It's one of the things I love about you. You don't bring that like so many astrologers do. But I was curious about this term. What is it? What does it mean?" Well, thank you, because I do pride myself on being a not fear-based. In fact, if someone commented about a post I did a while back, I don't know, where their comment was, "Oh, so fear-based," and it's like, what? You don't know who I am, honey. You probably just saw this one post and you're having a big projection about it, because I am not the fear-based guy. I'm the we got this guy. I am the resilience guy. But in ancient astrology, there was a way that the planets were divided into two camps. And the camps are malefic and benefic. Now, if that word malefic sounds a little bit like malevolent, it is.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
It's the same root word. So it means evil, essentially. And this is a word that came into use in 1500. So now go back many hundreds of years into a world where we knew nothing. We knew nothing of the unconscious and of science and of the modern sensibilities that we understand modern life through. Back in a superstitious time, there was good and evil.
Right.
And good and evil was superstitious and magical, not like what we might call as high vibe and low vibe consciousness, right? And I'm not saying there isn't evil in the world. There is. But back 500 years ago, 600 years ago, the idea of evil was everywhere. An unexplained phenomenon that was difficult was just the sort of domain of evil and the devil. And so there are planets that align with evil and bad stuff, and planets that align with good. And the bad planets are malefic, and the good planets are benefic. So again, superstitious, old consciousness. And like the moon, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury are considered like benefic planets, where the sun, Mars, Saturn, and the south and the north node of the moon are considered the malefics. It's like, that's crazy to me. Certainly in classic astrology, Mars and Saturn were considered the primary malefics. And I get that. Mars is the god of war. Saturn is the planet of like constriction and responsibility and lessons and learning. But in a modern world, we understand Mars as you make bad decisions, shitty stuff happens. Saturn says if you don't learn your lesson, life sucks. Nothing evil about that. It's just challenging. And all kinds of wonderful, beautiful things are the result of both Mars and Saturn moving around the planet. Now, Mars and Saturn are conjunct in Pisces right now. That gathering is part of eclipse season. So there is, in fact, a transit that hits in about a week's time where the planet of action and the planet of learning are coming together by conjunction. And that does put sort of a big brakes on lesson learning moment as part of the month of April. But it ain't evil.
I mean, I guess it just depends on how you interpret lessons that you need to learn.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I would prefer that nobody out there in 2024 in a modern world is blaming their problems on the principle of evil or the devil or any other sort of superstitious nonsense. We make bad decisions and shitty things happen, and we heal and grow and make better decisions. That's how that works. And there's the full-on 50% of life that is chaotic and random, where terrible things happen that is not part of the divine unfolding plan. Most manifestation folk don't want to talk about that either. Right? So there's plenty of reasons to expect and contextualize difficult occurrences. But in a modern world, we don't blame it on evil, and we don't say that Venus brings good, Mars brings bad, and that's the binary of that. So I run away from astrologers who are talking about some of these old book-trained kind of things. I sometimes get sort of decried as not a good astrologer because I'm not classically book-trained in the way that some are, and so I make up some rules. Yeah, I get it. If I were a classical sort of, rigid guy and some, maverick dude was out there shouting that we shouldn't be using this or that term, I might object to that. But like, I'm on the other side of that equation.
Yeah.
I have reasons why I share what I share about this. And that's specifically why I reject malefic and benefic, because it's superstitious. It's very old consciousness. It divides things up into good and evil. And that's just, there's no room for that in a modern world. It is quite a week. I mean, we start out the week with Mercury turning around today, and then we finish up the week on Sunday with a whoppum, new moon total solar eclipse in Aries. And Mercury is retrograde in Aries.
Yeah.
So let's just start out with that. We are just in Aries overdrive. So the purity of Aries as an archetype is that it's our ability to get started. We move with Aries energy because it's the archetype of the one that will go no matter what. I love the association between Aries and spring, because spring springs forth, and that's what we're doing in the Aries energy. We're springing forth into our next sort of like thrust of movement. And so Mercury in the sign of Aries when it's operating purely and positively, allows us to see where we want to go, to combine our kind of fiery impulses to move with our perceptions. So our conversations are driven by what we want to do and accomplish. And because Mercury is about how we're choosing to perceive life, and how we perceive things is how we experience them. It's like what you focus on grows. And in Aries, we're more likely to be focused on movement, action, starting things up, and feeling a little bit on fire and wanting to get moving as a result of impulses that demand action. Well, then we got to look at the pitfalls and the shadow of that. What's the biggest shadow of anything Aries oriented is anger, excess masculine energy, where we go beyond just the impulse to move and we add a kind of extra fieriness of reactivity and anger and explosive energy that's not well directed. Like Aries energy does not know about direction. It only knows to explode and move.
That sounds a little testy given a Mercury retrograde thrown in there.
Well, so
Like
yeah, a retrograde
miscommunication
is
and explosiveness. Okay.
right. So how that plays out for all of us is going to be a very individual story, which is always the case in personal planet retrograde, cycles. They hit us, they meet us where we are. So for sure, one thing to be in consideration of with Mercury going retrograde in Aries is how much does aggressive, fiery thoughts and words and perception patterns interfere with you creating a life that works? By the same token, the bottom of the wheel can be expressed that Mercury in Aries going retrograde is reaching out to all of y'all who can't find the power and the fire and the startup energy in your perceptions and your conversations to
Hmm.
find it, right? If a personal planet going retrograde is akin to visiting the unconscious, then the value of the cycle is going into the below territories and making adjustments. So this binary is not a bad place to start. Are you somebody who's too aggressive and fiery in your thoughts and perceptions? Do you need to tone that down? This Mercury retrograde will help. If you can't find the fire in your voice out of, unworthiness, inadequacy, or shyness, or any of other sort of sense of inhibition, this Mercury retrograde will help. There's only one triple transit in this Mercury retrograde cycle, which is really rare and unusual, and that's a conjunction to Chiron. That's enough right there to tell you exactly what the theme is for everybody.
Hmm.
The theme is going into the unconscious and finding the ways that your wounded spaces impact how you perceive and move about the world using your strong and powerful voice. If it's too much, you soften it. If it's not enough, you empower it. And the key to how to get through this is your own personal experience of wounded consciousness in your childhood experience, as well as the kind of wisdom of how to work with the underbellies and the cycles of life. That's a Chiron thing. Both the wound healing and the marshaling your use of the force, if you will. I sometimes call Chiron Yoda because he's the part of us that knows how to use the force,
Hmm.
right? Which, of course, we can't do as well if we have wounded consciousness. So between the two impacts of Chiron, lifting us up in wisdom of the cycles and healing wounds, that's the big theme of this Mercury retrograde cycle. Again, I really encourage you to get that webinar. It's absolutely free, and it will go into much more depth about all of this. So if you haven't gotten that, make sure you get on my mailing list, and we will get you that video in the next day or two. Mercury will remain in this backward posture between today and the 25th of April. We'll then turn around and go direct and carry that third act into the middle of May through May 13th. I, of course, will be talking about this every week while we move through it.
Yeah.
Because we are in eclipse season, the relationship between where the sun is and where the nodes of the moon are is key right now. These nodes of the moon are vectors of energy that shoot out in front of and behind the system of the moon orbiting around the earth and the earth moving around the sun. It is the angular alignment of earth, sun, and node of the moon that generates the geometry that causes us to pass through the shadow that we experience as eclipses here on earth. This particular eclipse season is what we would call a north node eclipse because the sun in Aries is aligned with the north node in Aries. So everything that comes up in this eclipse season is about this forward movement, where we're going, what we want to accomplish with the shooting out of the cannon that Aries energy gives us every spring. So even though last full moon was an eclipse, was a release mechanism, we were letting go of stuff so that we could shoot out more powerfully, as we will in the eclipse that hits on Sunday. What's notable about Thursday is that's the day that the sun in Aries and the north node in Aries are in exact alignment.
Hmm.
Thursday then becomes the day of the sort of forward movement, flowing, conscious awareness sensibility, right? So if the sun is our conscious awareness and it's going through the turning of the light off and on, that customer service moment, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again? Like, that's what we're doing in the eclipses. We're turning the light off and on again so that we can reset
Hmm.
it. So the sun is carrying the conscious awareness of what that means, what that needs, and how we might be perceiving where we're going. And the north node itself is the point that represents that forward flow. That's the groove. The north node holds the groove of where we're going. The sun holds the conscious awareness of everything. And in every eclipse season, there's going to be this moment when the sun aligns with the node in question, and there will be some awareness, some information, and some guidance as we move through Thursday. A little bit Wednesday, a little bit Friday too, but with a peak on Thursday. So just pay attention to what your life, what your consciousness, what your environment is telling you about where you're moving next and how the energy of thrust is feeling for you right now. There might be some interesting awarenesses as we move through the end of the week and towards the new moon on Sunday. So because that eclipse is a new moon, it's the kickoff of the next lunar cycle. It's also the kickoff of the astrological new year because Aries is the first sign. So the sun in Aries says we're ready to start up again. And the new moon is sort of the gunshot, if you will. So as we move towards the end of the week, your conscious awareness might reveal a thing or two about where to go, how to go, when to go, what to go do. And then we set intentions like crazy people on Sunday with the eclipse. There's a lot to say about Venus right now. So part of the bumpiness of the month of April is driven by something that happens on Friday. Venus is going to move into Aries. So for 3.5 weeks, which is how long Venus stays in a sign, our emotional bodies will be fired up by the Aries sensibility.
Hmm.
Now, Venus hates it here. This is the sign of her detriment. She does not like it in the sign that is opposite her ruling sign. So one of her ruling signs is Libra. Aries is the sign opposite of Libra. So that for any ruling planet, the sign that's opposite the ruling sign is a bad place, an uncomfortable place. I like to get away from the astrological sort of terms and more into the archetypal meaning behind this because it's much more easy to understand. Aries is a fire cardinal sign. It's all about movement, action, starting things up, masculine principle on fire, getting moving. It's Mars's ruling house. That's why he's so happy here. He gets to be in his man cave lighting up his farts. Venus, not comfortable here. Too much fire, too much aggressiveness. So that puts our emotional bodies in some stress for about 3.5 weeks, starting on Friday. Now, right before that, as we move through Wednesday, there's a gorgeous connection between Venus in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. This is one of those beautiful moments of like love is love is love is love
Mm.
is love is love is love. Venus is love at the personal level. Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So Neptune contains all the love and forgiveness and compassion that Venus understands at the personal level, but adds the element of the love of the divine to that mix. So when Venus and Neptune come together, or even just interact with each other in positive geometry, we are experiencing like a flood of the Piscean oriented loving consciousness, like compassion, forgiveness, the transformational and transmutational power of love is what Venus and Pisces knows. And coming together on Wednesday with Neptune, it's like we get this flood of what's possible when we allow the loving power of spirit to enter our hearts. Now, why this is interesting and important is because 2 days later, Venus leaves that loving place behind and sort of sacrifices herself to the fires of Aries. And then the next day after that, on Saturday, as we are in this sort of burgeoning wild eclipse energy that hits on Sunday, Venus in Aries will sextile Pluto in Aquarius. That's fire and air. The productive sextile allows us over the weekend and in this eclipse to have a transformative experience of allowing our hearts to get a little more fired up without going so far as to have the aggressive impulses eradicate
Hmm.
love. It's like an instructive moment of how do I stay loving if a power struggle rises up that might cause me to be defensive, where I can't help the fire in my heart over the weekend, but I might be able to bring in the memory of love is love is love is love is love that I just bathed in while I face a weekend that's just filled with fire. On a high level, because it's an eclipse and a new moon, and the eclipse is conjunct Chiron, it's a profoundly healing moment. We're setting intentions steeped in the consciousness of we've been healing our wounds for a long time. How can we move forward in a new and powerful way because of all the healing work we've done? Like that's one of the essential sensibilities of Sunday's new moon. And I just think there's something elegant for those of you, especially if you feel like your current narrative is a deep and powerful chironic healing moment. I mean, I am. I mean, I've healed all my wounds, but I'm revisiting every last freaking one of them because Saturn is on my Chiron right now. It's exact. So the teacher is demanding that I go way back in to all of the wounded consciousness. Uh, which, sucks on one hand, but I accept like how life works. We all have to do this, and this is one of those new moon moments where, in fact, we all have to sort of go into the wounded healing spaces, see what's been shifted, and allow for us to see how well we can keep more loving when the world is giving us what seems like unloving experiences. Every new moon in Aries is about getting new stuff started up. Aries is that sign.
Yeah.
It's the first sign of the zodiac. Cardinal energy, there's a cardinal fire sign. Cardinal, there are several modalities in astrology: cardinal, fixed, mutable. Mutable obviously is about change and flexibility. Fixed is about stability and unmovability. But cardinal signs start shit up. And each of the four cardinal signs is like the beginning of each season. And Aries is associated with the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere, where everything is budding up and beginning afresh. So, this is why, in some ways, the astrological new year starts with the new moon in Aries, even more so than the equinox when the sun moves into Aries. It's like then our conscious awareness is ready to start up and get moving. But it's at the new moon, when the moon moves into Aries, catches up with the Aries sun, that we set the intentions that kick off the power of the zodiacal wheel, moving from Aries all the way around to Pisces next year. So there are several things that make this new moon in Aries more intense. Obviously, it's an eclipse. So it's the same as any other new moon in Aries, because it is just a new moon where all we're doing is setting intentions, right? And it's setting intentions in the Aries sensibility of, what do you want to get started with? What are you ready to trigger movement on? But because it's an eclipse, it has the power to transform how we're moving, what we choose to do, start up new things. So, in some ways, because eclipses transmute us, we can be moving forward with this new moon in brand new, empowered ways because of the healing journey that we've been on. That, to me, is the essence of Sun, Moon, and Chiron, all at 19 degrees of Aries.
Mhm.
So the precision of that lights me up, because precision counts.
Right.
So, because I talk a lot about the wounded journey, because I come from trauma, my whole life has been, about healing the wounds so that I could be powerful in the world in the way that I think I was born to, that the wounded consciousness impeded. I had to heal those wounds first. But also remember that Chiron helps us navigate the world through wisdom. Not the wisdom of Saturn, who teaches us how to be responsible and do the right thing and slow down to kind of, learn responsibility. Chiron's wisdom is about how to work with the mystery. This is a mysterious place that we live in. Life is baffling and complicated, and Chiron knows how to use the force. This is why I talk about Chiron as Yoda, because everybody understands that image as the wisdom about using the force. The force in this equation is all of the mysteries of being alive and in a body and on this planet. And so we are setting intentions to be better stewards of our own inner wisdom, knowing that when we are aligned with Source and co-creating, then we're much more powerful. And Chiron understands that that's how it works. The first whisper into some manifestation teacher's ear that, we had to move in that way to create what we want came from Chiron, right? So the idea that we can manifest our realities is wisdom that Chiron imbues in us, and that's something that's steeped in this new moon in Aries, is setting intentions to be more powerful stewardships of the multidimensional wisdom we need to survive here. Mars and Saturn are, in fact, gathering in Pisces, which means we are in this lunar cycle ahead, moving through some marching orders that is going to carry us straight into some lessons. That's the power of Mars and Saturn together. And because they're both Mars carries our bodies through things that we need to experience, and Saturn says it's some learning and some lessons and some breakdowns and delays in order to generate those lessons. You can be assured that the lunar cycle ahead, especially in this first week of the lunar cycle next week, because we'll probably talk about this conjunction in next week's podcast. The angle between Mars and Saturn and the south node of the moon is the great eliminator. The south node is where we hold the past, we're trying to dump so that we can move more powerfully forward. And so Saturn and Mars are literally taking us through the lessons in the next week or so to help us drop the past in a new moon that's driven by an eclipse conjunct Chiron. In some ways, I think we meet this new moon and just like the watchword will be just like surrender. Fasten your seatbelts, go for the fiery ride, because we're gonna be going through a lot during this next lunar cycle that is directly driven by our healing narrative. So the more painful your personal healing journey has been in 2024, the more challenging this lunar cycle is going to be. But make no mistake about it. It changes us completely from the inside out. And so I would invite you to set intentions on Sunday from a place of, if my wounded consciousness were not an impact on my forward movement at all, what kind of intentions would I set completely courageously and enthusiastically? That's how to approach the ritual of setting intentions on Sunday. And just know that when we gather here next week in the podcast for the second week in April, we'll be talking all about all of this again, because we will, in fact, be in it next week.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email and dream from Erin. So Erin says, first time emailer, but long time listener.
Yay.
She's a therapist, and so she really enjoys the dream segment,
Yay.
which I think is awesome. Here she goes. For most of my life, I've had intense, vibrant, and lucid to semi-lucid dreams. Sometimes they feel like mini epics, as this one certainly did. I can't remember ever having dreamed about a dragon, and I was so puzzled by this meaning. I dreamt I was at a dinner party. It was a hazier part of the dream, and it took place earlier in the evening. I remember it feeling stuffy, boring, and obligatory. The next thing I remember is that I was being chased by a huge dragon, just barely out of my awareness. I had been vaguely knowledgeable of its presence outside of the party, but now it was suddenly the focal point. I remember thinking no one knew why I left the party. I was running away from it down some stairs in a large house where the party took place, when the stairs began to turn into a cave. I hid behind a bend in this rather hallway-like cave behind some rocks. And as I crouched down, another person, who was also running from the dragon, ran in behind me. I didn't know who it was, just that it was someone that was also at the party. Almost immediately after that person hid, I saw the dragon's long neck pass the bend into the cave right in front of me. I had just enough space to slip past the dragon and back out of the cave in the direction I'd come. I ran back up the stairs and through the party, where I jumped out of a shattered, huge glass window overlooking a valley and started to fly. It was nighttime, and there were tons of stars, but no moon, so it was quite dark. I could feel the dragon gaining on me, even though I was going as fast as I could. We were high in the air, and I knew I was no match. Up until this point, the dream had almost felt fun or adventurous. I knew I was in danger, but could outrun the dragon. As soon as I realized he was going to catch me, another woman flew up beside me. She was a few decades older than me. She was also running from the dragon, but I sensed she meant me no harm, and her eyes were beginning to glow red. I could choose to address both her and the dragon in some way. If I stopped running from them, but the risk felt too high, and I didn't feel like I had the energy. So I forced myself to wake up, knowing the dream would escalate if I didn't. Okay, sorry, that was kind of long, but I like the dragon, and that was the dream.
No, I totally get why you love this dream, and it's perfect. It's an awesome dream, and it's really just about it's a very simple interpretation. This is
Really?
really just a dream. Oh my god, yeah, well, here are the salient things in the dream, right? That there's a well, we'll just sort of move through it the
Yeah.
way we do. We start with a dinner party, right? So we're in the current sense of how Aaron feels fed, okay? But I love the idea that dragons represent, especially, well, Eastern dragons represent charisma, movement, power, excitement. There's all sorts of really juicy, powerful energies associated with the dragon in the Eastern symbol. In Western culture, the dragon is about hoarding wealth and guarding virgins, two things it has no use for. The dragon doesn't need money, and what's it going to do with a
Yeah.
virgin other than burn her up, right? It's like, so the idea of a Western dragon is about like deferred or delayed abundance. It's like it's guarding, hoarding wealth. This does not feel like a Western dragon dream to me at all. This feels like an Eastern dragon dream where the dragon is the fire of moving through life powerfully. In fact, I think it's hysterical that where Aaron is being fed in the dream is stuffy, boring, and obligatory. And then what happens? She goes on a little shadow dive to find a relationship with charisma, power, movement, excitement. It feels dangerous, but she knows she's not in danger. That's like living life at a very high level. Life feels scary, but when we're willing to take risks and we're out there on the ledge and we're trying new things, it can be a very exciting game to play. And I think this dream is exemplifying that. So we're in this. I'm being fed in a way that is not serving me in a juicy way. It feels like the standard old way. Obligatory to me implies we've done this a million times before.
Mhm.
I like this little piece of it that she implies that though the dragon suddenly appears and she's being chased by it, that there was an awareness of it before that happened. That while she's sitting in this boring place, there's this awareness of something hovering. That to me is like the impulse to do it differently, to do life more in a more vibrant, sort of participatory way. No one knows why I left. That's interesting to me. That means to me this is about a very singular shadow dive. The no one that knows, those are her thoughts, right? If we look at the dinner party as just Erin's thinking mind, and they don't know that she's got to do this dive. That, to me, tells me that Erin's not in a crisis where life has to stop while she does some investigating. Like, life could just keep on moving, but privately, her dream is asking her to go on a little bit of a dive. You know, down the stairs implies going to a deeper place of unconscious awareness below the
Mhm.
surface. Cave is vaginal. We go into a cave to be sort of reborn in a way, and we emerge from the cave just like a birth. So both of those images, when she runs away from the party, she is both being asked to go to a lower level in her unconscious processing and get some interesting information down there and allow for something to be held for a little bit. Cave consciousness says, I go into the womb and I allow something new to be born. So, this first person in the dream, that's interesting. This is the person who just sort of runs
Yeah, and
in, is
hides as
also
well.
being chased by and hides. You know, the thing that image in the dream, like if this were my dream, I would see that person as the old way of kind of, sort of working with the dragon, but ultimately hiding. Right? Erin's in this space, and there's some stuff driving her. There's movement and curiosity driving
Mhm.
her. And this person comes in and doesn't get moved or driven, hides, in fact. So since it's Erin's dream, and this is an aspect of Erin, I'm going to call that person the part of Erin who's been here before, but just ultimately hides out, doesn't further the work.
Mhm.
Which to me is important because then there's this other thing that happens as she runs back up. She comes to the pane of glass that would look like an invisible obstacle, right? The glass is, in fact, an obstacle. You can't really pass through it readily or easily, yet it's invisible. It's transparent. You can see through it. So you could think of a pane of glass as an obstacle you couldn't even see,
Mm.
like denial or not readiness.
Yeah.
It's also, she doesn't call it a window, so I can't use window as a interpretive language because, oh, she did say window,
Um,
did she?
she shattered a huge glass window overlooking a valley.
Ah, okay, great. So a window is also an image of contemplation before action.
Hmm.
If we take the action, right? Ipso facto, we did take action. We moved through the window in this dream. But, right, you look out a window and you can see an environment you are not in.
Mhm.
And it's a block and an obstacle. So back to that idea, this glass window was like the glass ceiling of Erin's previous shadow work.
Hmm.
And in this dream, she busts through
Yeah.
that. That's the juicy part of the dream. She's like, woo, watch me fly, baby. I am busting that glass inhibition
Mhm.
and I'm flying. But it's deep shadow work that she flies into. Even though it's exultant and flying is probably the most fun you can have in a dream, it's dark. There's no moon. So she's being called to fly into the deeper shadow work of working with life's magic and charisma and creative power dragon. So she's in new territory and she meets the part of her that's helpful. This female character aspect who's a little bit older, also running from the dragon, but has more wisdom than Erin does. In fact, the red eyes are interesting to me that this woman has red beating eyes. Well, red is the color of the root chakra, which I always associate with safety,
Hmm.
security. So if we're in deep shadow work and we're flying around with the dragons, we better freaking feel grounded and secure so that we can do the work. This is a character aspect of Aaron that is grounded, sees through grounded safety and security. Therefore, she could fight the dragon with more power and efficacy than Aaron can right now. And Aaron recognizes she could stop running, but that risk felt too high. That reminds me of the chick in the cave who hides. Aaron's at a moment where it's like, I could stand still and not take this risk, but it's actually more risky to not.
Right.
I loved this dream.
Yeah, I was like, dragon, let's do it.
Well, I love the motivation. Thank you for sharing, Aaron. This was awesome.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.